ਗੁਰੂ ਪਿਆਰੀ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ। ਤੁਸੀਂ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਹੋ PBC 775। ਅਸੀਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਸਪੈਸ਼ਲ ਸ਼ੋਅ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਮੋਰਚੇ ਤੇ। ਸੋ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਮੋਰਚਾ 2 ਇੱਕ ਵਾਰ ਫੇਰ ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਮੋਰਚਾ ਚੱਲ ਪਿਆ। ਕੀ ਲੋੜ ਪੈ ਗਈ, ਗਾਂ ਕੀ ਹੋਊਗਾ, ਕੀ ਚੱਲ ਰਿਹਾ, ਕਿਉਂ ਦੁਬਾਰਾ ਕਿਸਾਨੀ ਮੋਰਚਾ ਚੱਲਣਾ ਪਿਆ। ਦ ਵਰਲਡਸ ਬਿਗੇਸਟ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਸਟ as it was known। ਸੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਗੈਸਟ ਜੁੜੇ ਹਨ। ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਫਤਿਹ ਬੁਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਹਾਂ। ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ ਜੀ।
ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।
ਸੋ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਾਲ ਜੁੜੇ ਹਨ ਭਾਈ ਦਵਿੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਸਿੱਖ ਫੈਡਰੇਸ਼ਨ UK, ਅਤੇ ਜਸ ਸਿੰਘ, ਸਿੱਖ ਫੈਡਰੇਸ਼ਨ UK। ਸੋ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਬਹੁਤ ਬਹੁਤ ਧੰਨਵਾਦ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਵੀ ਤੇ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਵੀ ਸਾਡੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਦੇ ਕੀਮਤੀ ਸਮੇਂ ਵਿੱਚੋਂ ਸਮਾਂ ਕੱਢ ਕੇ ਜੁੜੇ। ਸੋ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਸਟੂਡੀਓ ਨੂੰ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਾਂਗਾ, ਸਟਾਰਟ ਕਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਇੱਕ ITV ਦੀ ਨਿਊਜ਼ ਕਲਿੱਪ ਆ, ਉਹ ਪਲੀਜ਼ ਚਲਾ ਦਿਓ ਜੀ।
A country with its own space program, its most powerful political force hails from another age altogether. They are India's farmers, and they are on the march weeks ahead of the world's biggest general election there. Thousands are descending on Delhi, or at least trying to. They are demanding guarantees of a minimum purchase price for crops, something they were first protested about in 2021. They want the government to honour a promise to double their income and ensure they earn a 50% profit on top of their overall production costs. Most of the farmers have travelled from the Punjab with the aim of reaching the capital, Delhi.
Even through the clouds of tear gas, it's easy to see the trouble brewing for the world's would-be superpower. Battalions of furious farmers on a collision course with India's government and a general election in sight. Down with Modi is their battle cry. At stake, state guarantees for agricultural prices and the future of the millions who work the land.
The anger is very much palpable. The farmers and the workers are determined that we will fight this government. We will resist the corporate loot that is going on. And also in the elections, we'll give a fitting rebuff to them.
It is little more than 2 years since the farmers inflicted a rare defeat on the government of Narendra Modi after they occupied the outskirts of Delhi for 12 months. But the issues are still unresolved. And today the authorities are ready to defend the capital again, turning the city into a fortress, blocking farmers' access, banning protests, armed police on standby.
1-0.
But while Prime Minister Modi has put his nation into space,
India is now on the moon.
a new age of farm reform is proving harder to launch. Critics say changes empower corporate agriculture. So this is a clash of India new against old.
This is not a government that is counting its successes, having completed a decade in power, being anti-farmer or not caring for the agricultural sector is not a tag that this government would like to exit, as they want to exit on a note of triumph.
The Farmers' March has been halted for now, 125 miles from Delhi, but a countryside strike has been called for Friday. Modi will underestimate the power of tradition at his peril. John Ray, News at 10.
ਸਾਧ ਸੰਗਤ ਜੀ, ਇਹ ਸੀ ਕਲਿੱਪ ITV ਵੱਲੋਂ। ਉਹ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਕਿ what they're saying is that a country that's going to the moon can launch to the moon। ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮੁਲਕ ਜਾਨੀ ਸਪੇਸ 'ਚ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਚੰਦਰਮਾ ਤੇ ਜਾਣ ਦੀਆਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ਾਂ ਜਾਂ ਕੀਤੀਆਂ ਜਾ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਮਿਸ਼ਨਸ, ਉਹ ਆਪਦੇ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨਾਲ ਇੰਨਾ ਬੁਰਾ ਸਲੂਕ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ, ਜਾਂ ਫਾਰਮਿੰਗ ਕਮਿਊਨਿਟੀ ਨਾਲ ਧੱਕਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ। ਸੋ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਦਵਿੰਦਰਜੀਤ ਸਿੰਘ ਜੀ, ਮੈਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਵੱਲ ਆਵਾਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਸੋ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਸਾਲ ਡੇਢ ਸਾਲ 2 ਸਾਲ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਤੁਰੇ ਸੀਗੇ ਦਿੱਲੀ ਵੱਲ, ਕੂਚ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀਗਾ, ਤੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਕੈਪੀਟਲ 'ਚ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਇਦਾਂ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਸਟ ਕੀਤੀ ਸੀ ਸੋ ਦ ਫਾਰਮਰਸ ਡਿਡ ਅ ਪ੍ਰੋਟੈਸਟ ਮੈਂ ਮਾਫੀ ਮੰਗਦਾ ਸੋ ਅੱਗੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਇਹ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਆ ਸ਼ੋ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ 'ਚ ਹੋਵੇ ਸੋ ਅਸੀਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਸਾਸੰਗ ਜੀ ਵੀ ਇੰਗਲਿਸ਼ 'ਚ ਵੀ ਹੋਵੇ ਤੇ ਥੋੜੇ ਜਿਹੇ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ 'ਚ ਵੇ ਵੀ ਕੈਨ ਸੋ where the farmers protested in Delhi the world's largest protest so the farmers came back thinking they'd won something, but what actually happened there? So the protest happened, massive outcry. The farmers helped loads of people locally as well. The people of Delhi said that it's the safest they've ever felt. Then the farmers came back. Did they not win that bout? Would you say? Why are they having to go back? Devinderji Singh ji, dasonge please.
I think it's important just to reflect back on what happened because actually the years go by. So firstly, the farm laws that the Modi government tried to introduce, they introduced those in September 2020. So these laws are put in place. Remember, there's COVID in the background here as well. And what you then saw were farmers from different states, led by farmers of Punjab, taking their protest to Delhi. And I'll very quickly just run through. Everyone remembers the 26th of January 2021. Deep Sidhu's name is very much on our lips of how at the Lal Killa, how the farmers got there, how they raised the Sikh flag. These are all things that we shouldn't forget. That happened in January 2021. And what the ITV was saying was then later that year, more than a year after the farmers' protest started, the world's largest protest involving 250 million people, Narendra Modi, for the very first time since he took power in 2014, had to take back the 3 farm laws, those 3 black laws as they were described. And he did that on the Gurpurb of Guru Nanak Dev Ji in November 2021. So the question you were asking is why are the farmers now having to repeat what they did back in 2021? It's basically the various promises that were made about prices, about the livelihood of farmers. The government has let them down. And so what they've started doing, and again, the farmers of Punjab is what ITV highlighted. When you see those images, you see those images mainly of Sikhs, people with the stars. And today we've been seeing live footage screened to us of how the police are not only using tear gas, they're using rubber bullets, they're shooting farmers, they're being injured, they're being taken to hospitals, and yet the jajwat, the feelings of ordinary farmers are, if you challenge somebody's livelihood, their very well-being, they will sacrifice everything. And if the government thinks it's going to get away with this, I think those messages from ordinary people, there's no Deep Sidhu, they killed him. But there are ordinary farmers that will lay down their lives, as they were saying, be Guru Sahib, Sawa lakh na ladaunga. Those are the sort of words and language they're using. Like ordinary Sikhs, not even like Amritali Sikhs, not even Kesatali Sikhs, but they are basically saying that Guru spirit that's within them and that Gurbani, they are prepared to lay down their lives. Because if you challenge somebody's livelihood, if you challenge their very well-being, they will say it's better to die.
So, Jasing, I'll come over to yourself. So, you know, there was a big thing played out, like by Devinderji Singh said, the 26th, there was a massive achievement, we thought, what happened there. The government tried to stop the protesters, the Punjabis, Haryanvis, the Sikhs, get into the Red Fort. They got to the Red Fort regardless, and they hoisted the Kasani flag. The India flag was still intact, and the Nishan Sahib was actually hoisted there as well. And I think we remember the happiness in most Sikhs and Punjabis at that point. And then something happened at that point. Can you just run us back through there? And if you've got anything to add on the failings of what happened between the government officials and the farmers or the government at that point for Kissan Morcha 2 to now be reinstigated.
Sure. I think first and foremost, the farmers' protest, as it organically arose, it was because of the draconian laws that were
Yeah.
pro-corporate. So 3 farm laws,
Mm.
as Baji mentioned, were brought in very quietly and unconstitutionally. They weren't debated in the
Yeah.
House. They weren't consulted on, brought in through COVID, and they were very much favouring corporate greed. And that would have
Yeah.
discriminated against the thousands, hundreds of thousands of Punjabi farmers, which is why there was this whole rebellion and pushback from farmers against those. No one ever said that the farming system and industry in Punjab was fair or efficient. But the reforms that were being brought in would have made things a lot worse. They weren't addressing the fundamental problems. They were creating new ones in favor of the government. And it was a land grab. And we'll come on to that because a lot of those are the reasons why, as you said, Farmers Protest 2.0 has kicked off in the
Yeah.
last 24 hours. But going back to your question around the 26th of January, that was a key date because farmers, all the Kisan and Mazdoor organizations, all the farmer worker organizations were standing united. They were unmovable. For a year,
Yeah.
they were camped out on the borders of Delhi, sleeping there. They had all their facilities and there was full unity. There had been various meetings.
Yeah.
All of those meetings had been a failure from the government to try and break that. The 26th of January was India's Republic Day. And there was a planned protest and a drive to the center of Delhi on that date. Now, the authorities purposely diverted and changed the routes for the farmers to take them towards the Red Fort. So this was a whole plan instigated by the government to demonize the movement, the farmers' protest, because they had tried and failed in their entirety to label them as extremists, as terrorists, as Khalistanis. Anything they could throw at them, they were failing. And they had this huge support of not only Punjabis, people from Haryana, they were from all over India. As Baji says, refers to the 250 million labor workers across all of India were in unison in striking. So the government was in complete failure. The only way they could react was to play that same old card of demonizing a legitimate legal protest to try and turn public opinion and support off them. And that's what they did. There was a very, I would say, jovial and pleasant atmosphere at the Red Fort. If you look at the pictures, there was a lot of spirit, a lot of strength, but there was no violence. There was no attack. There was no criminal damage. There was actually no crime committed. But the wall-to-wall media coverage was that India was under attack. Delhi had been swarmed by terrorists and they'd attacked and invaded the integrity and sovereignty of India. That's the line. These are Indian citizens. These are Indian citizens, Indian nationals who'd come to their capital. Yet that's how they were branded. And Deep Sidhu was labeled the instigator of that and deemed a terrorist and had to go underground. And Deep Sidhu, again, was an Indian actor, a very prominent lawyer. He had to go underground because they demonized him as such that there was threats to his life. A month later, he is suspiciously killed in a road traffic accident in February. And people will know about that. But this is the same Indian tactic that is being deployed today. So coming back to those farm laws, whilst the 3 farm laws were repealed, which stopped that corporate greed and corporate control over the farmers, the issues that were persistent in Punjabi farm industry around the minimum support price, the MSP, Government has already passed legislation which guarantees the farmers a specific a minimum price for whatever crop it produces. There's a price per crop. They have not been meeting that minimum price for decades. And that was the fundamental issue here. That's why farmers have struggled. That's why they've had to increase production, repeat the pesticides and insecticides into the soil to try and increase the number of crops they can grow, increase the volume of it, effectively poisoning their own land. But because of the demand, they are not getting a fair price or a legal price, and they're having to work extra, more load on the land and more load on the water resources, which are already depleted. So this strategy of the government was counterproductive. And what the farmers demanded was that the government officials respect and uphold the MSP primarily. And if they pay the fair price, farmers do not have to then force themselves to grow uneconomical crops and environmental friendly crops like rice and paddy fields. They can grow other things and sugarcane, which cause ecological concerns. But all of these factors have not been adhered to. We've talked about debt. Farmer suicide has been at sky high levels. And again, it's down to this inflated debt that has been placed upon farmers' heads. Again, that was a demand that the debt be waived from all farmers because it was artificial and itself created by the government. So that debt, whilst promised, has not been relieved. They talked about justice. Over 700 people lost their lives in the farmers' protest, and 8 in particular were murdered at the Lakhimpur massacre in UP in October 2021, when the BJP officials, a BJP minister's son, drove his car and killed peaceful protesters. No inquiry has gone on to that incident, as well as the hundreds of deaths that happen at the border. So there are a number of other factors around free trade, looking at pensions for labourers and farmers, as well as amending the stubble burning laws, which again cause environmental issues. So these are real matters, social and civil and economic concerns of the farmers. And none of those matters the government has dealt with or responded to accordingly. So there's been weeks and months of discussion with government about this. And in all of those meetings, the government have failed to resolve any of the demands or concerns of the farmers. And in fact, have been so ignorant to not even turn up to their own discussions. And that resulted in yesterday, on the 12th and 13th of February 2024, for farmers to restart their protest, and the call was made for everybody to land to Delhi. And that call was made by all the Kissan Jathebandis, the labourers from Haryana, Punjab, UP, and all of those descended onto Delhi. And I'm sure we'll see footage of how the Delhi government, police, and the Indian government greeted its own citizens on a peaceful protest.
Thank you very much for that information, Jazz. So, Devinderjeet Singh ji, I'll come over to yourself. Deep Sidhu, Jazz just spoke about him, and I think you mentioned his name as well. So, 15th of February, which is tomorrow. So we're filming on the 14th of February today. So 15th of February is the day that he passed away in a strange car accident. So a lot of Gurdwara Sahibs up and down the world, or up and down the UK as well, having programs in his memory. Is it not poignant that, his Barsi is coming up, and you're having to have these protests all over again, and yet again the farmers are being held at the borders, like I think Shambhu, where the original protest started, and Deep spearheaded the protest from there and motivated and mobilized the youth, and the elders brought them together, brought the Jathebandiyan together. They all worked together to get to Delhi. And like Jazz just said, Deep was being demonized throughout the whole process because I think they were worried because of Deep's aspirations for the Badshahi Dawa, Sikh sovereignty, and the Soch that most Sikhs, or those that understand what Santji was trying to deliver in terms of Prachar, trying to tell us, look, guys, you need to fight for these rights. If you don't do it today, you don't do it tomorrow. One day, you will have to fight for those rights. Things like water rights, thing about equality, being treated as a equal citizen. What do you say to that, by the Vindaji Singh? And also alongside that, they're trying to hold the farmers out of Delhi on the borders, and the blocks, the concreted things down so that the farmers can't get in. You're seeing what looks like medieval torture devices being assembled at the roadside or blocking the road. What do you say to that?
I think there's so many things I could say to Deep Singh. Firstly, as you said, tomorrow will be the second anniversary. So on the 15th of February 2022 was when Deep Sidhu was killed. And 2 years later, we're seeing those farmers return to Delhi, or trying to return to Delhi. I think they're referring to this protest as Delhi Chalo March. And what we saw, and not just on the ITV, but what we saw on most media channels across the globe, is them very quickly pick up that this time round, you remember back then at the Shambhu border, they did very similar tactics. They put concrete, they put things there. But the one thing they never realized back then is farmers are very resourceful. They find ways to move these things. And they, within a matter of minutes, could remove those concrete barriers, etc. This time round, I think what we've seen from some of those images, some of the video clips and some of those images being shared in mainstream media, is the Indian government is going to greater lengths. Water cannon, rubber bullets, and those barricades seem to go on forever in terms of concrete, barbed wire, etc. However, don't be mistaken. The Kisans, the farmers in India, are very resourceful. So if the government have a plan, they will also have a plan. But let me just go back and just repeat one or two of those things. When the Kissan Morcha started, well before the 26th of January 2021, the Indian government started labeling farmers as Khalistanis. It happened well before the 26th of January. I think, given it was India's Republic Day on 26th of January, given what happened, it happened for a reason, because you had farmers who were not even Punjabis, who were not even Sikhs, saying, if the government want to call us Khalistanis, then we are Khalistanis. And actually, that completely backfired on the government, because the one thing you have to realize is the Kisans, the farmers of India, are the biggest group. There are 200 unions that are backing this Delhi Chalo March. It's not one union, it's 200 of them. And they're not just Punjab based. And therefore, what you've got is a situation where the government are trying to seal the Shambhu border to stop the farmers of Punjab getting anywhere near Delhi. Well, time will tell whether the farmers find a way to do it, or whether the government will be successful this time by using, tactics and potentially resorting to live firing to stop the protesters. Now, the thing we really need to talk about, it is, as you said, the 14th of February 2024. And I've just posted an article on social media which says the farmers are the BJP's Achilles heel with Lok Sabha elections approaching. There are high stakes at the moment. Modi knows, and as ITV said, that he could find out at his peril that the only real opposition to the BJP and Modi as they approach the Lok Sabha elections are the farmers, the biggest voting bloc across India. And
60%,
that's
apparently.
something, yeah, that's something the Modi government have now got a real issue. If they use heavy-handed techniques to stop farmers protesting, raising their legitimate voices about the minimum support price, if they use those heavy-handed techniques, which is what they're doing, they may try and suppress the farmers. They may even stop their protest. But one thing they can't stop is how the farmers decide to vote them. So they've got a real dilemma. If they use heavy-handed techniques, if they stop, any other democratic person across the globe will say, why can't you protest? Is it in India protests are not allowed? And it reminded me, in 1982, there were the Asian Games being held in Delhi. And that was a major turning point where the people of Punjab, retired police officers, Sikh police officers, retired army people were all stopped on their way to Delhi. And what that did was it changed a movement that was perhaps seen as simply a dharmic movement to people just saying, this is straightforward discrimination against Sikhs and the people of Punjab. And I think this is exactly the same. This is discrimination against Kissans, farmers. They're saying you cannot protest in Delhi. We lost to you once in 2021. They can't afford to lose again. But the downside is they could lose the election if their tactics are wrong. So this is probably what a massive thing that governments around the globe will be watching to say the opposition in India, political opposition, is dead. But the one opposition that stands tall are the farmers of India who will, you can see this happening in the next few months, create a situation where Modi will not know where to turn.
Okay. So, Sasangi, you might have seen videos where, the young farmers these days, they have a game that they play with their tractors. They tow each other's tractors or tie them up, and then they'll go in the opposite directions to see which tractor wins. And Baisab just said that the farmers are very resourceful. So something I saw was where they had a JCB and they were trying to do something to seal the border, and the farmers came along with their tractor, farm ready, and they dragged the JCB away while it was in action. So I found that quite amusing. So Jazz Singh, if I come towards yourself, so if we look at the current climate and the farmers' protests, so we've had the drug epidemic, we've had Khalsa Vahid being clamped down on. What was Amritpal Singh doing? He was just stopping the drug epidemic and trying to bring people closer to Sikhi. Amritpal Krondesi. So, he had so many people around him every day. You could say thousands, if not more than that, every day of Sangat around Amritpal Singh. So they've done that. Then there's the violation of human rights. You've got the news every day in the media now, which is trending, it seems, the safety of Sikhs, or the assassinations, the conspiracies to assassinate by Avtar Singh Khanda's, mysterious death. With the farmers' protests, it seems like the government just doesn't care. With all these things that are happening, they've got egg on their face blatantly. The British or worldwide press, the broadsheets are calling India fascist, and they're on a slippery slope. What do you say to all this?
I think the reality is when you're an evil state, I think the veil of democracy has now clearly left India. And as you mentioned, we've had decades of repression and oppression of minorities, Sikhs in particular, but all minorities across India have been repressed by the state, particularly the BJP, but even the Congress before that. But there was always this veil of the world's largest democracy. And I think recent activities, such as since the farmers' protest and since the rise of Deep Sidhu, by Amritpal Singh as head of the widest Punjab there. And then the transnational repression, the killing of Avtar Singh, the killing of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, the assassination plots, even this week in Canada. All of these now have removed that democratic veil of India. It is now well established, and we should all refer to India as an elected autocracy. And that's what it is. It's an autocratic state that is Hindutva, far-right Hindutva ideology, which is against all minorities. And this is now becoming clearer. And the farmers' protest, as Baji mentioned, is the most direct threat to their domination. And which is why we're seeing the most ludicrous and totally illegal activities. I mean, what we're talking about, well, you talked about the barricades, we're talking spikes in the ground, rows of spikes designed to injure and kill. That's what these barricades are for. Barbed wire. And what we saw yesterday was the illegal use of drones, dropping tear gas and poisonous chemical weapons are being thrown from drones, remotely controlled drones, into the middle of the crowds. So those canisters, when they fall, they explode. So these are live explosions that are happening in elderly, peaceful crowds, and then smoke. And we saw hundreds of people be injured yesterday in these attacks. Over in one site alone, over 100 grenades were thrown into the protest, causing huge amount of injuries. But the farmers are persisting. They will figure out a way to do it. They are even now telling people, get a boardie, a Hessian sack, wet it and throw it over it. So there are tactics that they are now having to use to defend themselves. Yet we saw on loudspeaker at Shambhu border instructions to the police to go heavy-handed. Do not let the protesters give them an inch, and whatever they do, you meet them with violence if necessary. I mean, that's the message of how it. I mean, if we look at this in context, Delhi has actually surrounded itself and turned itself into a concentration camp, because Punjab and all the other states are on the outside, and Delhi is that afraid that they have created this secure protection around its own border. That's how nervous they are, and these are the actions of an evil terror state. What they're doing is just barricading themselves in. And if you put that into context, we've seen farmers protest throughout Europe in recent months. Those who've been following the news would have seen the protests across Paris, the Netherlands, Germany, and you've had protesters full freedom to protest, roll their tractor motorcades into the capital, into Paris, into Amsterdam, into Berlin, etc. So these protests have not been met by the army, by tanks, by armed forces, by barricades, because it's a violation of your human rights. It's a violation of the Indian constitution. But they are doing this so brazenly is because of the fear factor that if the farmers come and raise their basic rights, we will lose, because you cannot stand and argue against it. And the one thing I did want to touch on is ultimately this goes beyond the farm laws, or now what is the farmers' rights, because that's where this originated from. What this has demonstrated, both of these agitations have demonstrated, this is about self-determination of all Punjabis and farmers, labourers, whether that's Haryana, whether that's UP, the northern states of India. They can no longer operate within the Indian federal structure, which is central government controlled. We've seen that the government have tried to control land policy, agricultural policy, and the water rights of Punjab, and have all been to the detriment of all of Punjab state and the surrounding states. So the reality, this movement is about self-determination and Punjab becoming autonomous and independent. It's the only way, it's the only solution. There can be no trust in the government or any of its departments that they will negotiate, that they will honor any of their commitments that are made through this agitation or even previous ones. So therefore, you can't keep doing the same thing and having any faith in the government. When this level of uprising occurs, we saw out of the first farmers' protest, the Wireless Punjab, the organization was established. And the government saw the threat because these were educated youngsters of Punjab trying to reverse the migration. As you said, get people off the drug epidemic in Punjab, get them working, and then pursue an equal and fair state. This is now highlighting the absolute necessity for that, because the government has had 2 years, and the new Punjab government under the Aam Aadmi Party again is a failed Punjab government. It's just an extension of what is happening in Delhi, because they have not implemented any of the changes that were agreed to. So none of these politicians or parties can be relied upon. Neither can the Akali Dal, for that matter. This is now organic movement and revolution which is coming from the grounds of Punjab, Haryana, UP, and ultimately it will be another figure that comes out of this and emerges that will lead those individuals and those Punjabis to their freedom, and ultimately that's the only solution that can come out of this. I think now the difference is now the world is realizing this. Global governments have realized that India is a very dangerous state, and actually having other states, independent nations, are actually more advantageous and helpful. And there is a real need of oppression, whether it's to the Sikhs, to the Muslims, to the Christians. All of this stuff is now being, a spotlight is being shined upon it, and hopefully this will drive further support for those movements on the ground.
Okay, so we've got about 5 minutes to go, so we need to try to get some kind of summary. So, by the Binderjeet Singh, if I come over to yourself, so we saw in the first Kissan Morcha that some of the leadership and even some of the public were very worried about being painted as being Khalistani, for example, because they maybe thought that it's going to impact the result that they can have at the end of the Morcha. So even though they may have agreed with the views of self-determination and what most Panthak or Khalistani Jathebandiyan, you could say, have, or Sikhs have, they wanted to keep those two things separate. But as time's now gone on, and as the human rights violations continue for 35-40 years, all the human rights violations that have happened, the people that have been killed, justice hasn't been received by the families. The parents or the elders have gone looking at the doorway, hoping that their loved ones will step through that doorway, and to their dismay, nothing seems to have happened. The people that have served their sentences, they're still inside. Jagtar Singh Johal still inside. In fact, rather than allowing us to help these Sikhs get released, they seem to be jailing more and more Sikhs as time goes on. So, going back to the sovereignty thing, and what we've seen recently with Pana Sidhu's case, where he was like, a community worker, you could say, helping people where there were money issues or fraud was happening against them, and he got locked up, and he apparently he was tortured and abused in inside jails. Does this not just push people against the Indian government, and then it'll create an atmosphere where it doesn't matter if people are Khalistani or not, they'll just turn against this RSS agenda? What do you think?
Just 2 or 3 very quick points. Firstly, The Independent's just published an article where basically we've heard in recent weeks how they refer to Sikhs abroad as enemies of the state. And what The Independent has got under its headline is they're almost treating the farmers as enemies of the state. And I'll put a different spin on this. What the people in power in Delhi are doing around Delhi, and actually I would go further, that the Indian state will be confined to Delhi. All around the rest of India, people will say, let's just have our own autonomy. Let's have our own nations, not just the Sikhs, not just the Punjabis. It's just that Sikhs and Punjabis are freedom-loving people. that always take the lead and always have taken the lead, whether it be Indian independence or prior to that. So I think that's the situation. If you label farmers as the enemies of the state, sooner or later those farmers say, so be it. We are their enemies, your enemies, but we want our freedom. And so it goes much beyond that simple issue that this is about farmers and farmers' rights. But I think the other thing is, even the police and even the paramilitary, are you telling me they're not linked to the farmers? Of course they are. Deep down, probably the majority of them have come from farming families. And therefore the government need to be very much aware that its own police and armed forces is, if you use too much brutality, they will turn against the people sitting in Delhi in their expensive homes. And this is really now a power struggle.
Cool. Okay. So, Jazz, we've gone a little bit over time. So what do you want to say in the last minute, please?
I think, look, it is a very worrying when we see the footage of how the internet has been shut down, journalists are being harassed again and targeted. These things are very dangerous, and really it shines a light on that terror state that we've all been referring to, that India operates in. But for our viewers, and a final, never look at this as a single isolated issue. It is not just about farmers. We've seen this is an economic issue, but there's an education issue in Punjab, how Punjab and Punjab history is being targeted, our language is being targeted. There's a religious issue, but the multiple beadabis that are ongoing, how Sikhs are not free to practice their own faith in Punjab. And there's a social issue around drugs, alcohol, abuse, investment, etc. So these are all issues that are now coming together. We need to tackle them as a collective. Dealing with one is not going to resolve the problems for Punjab. When you look at it in its entirety, then you'll realize that the solution is freedom. And that's where the discussions with academics, with politicians, and the think tanks of the Sikh community need to now come together and work that roadmap with Western governments.
Cool. So thank you very much for your time, Jazz Singh and Bhai Ji Singh Ji. So Satsang Ji, so in closing summary, all I'll say is, so Sant Ji said that you'll need to fight for your rights at some point. The way, not just the Sikhs, that the inequality that's been painted against people, whether it be on caste basis or religion, is an issue for all of India, and it needs addressing, and we'll have to fight against it. And sometimes maybe we don't heed the message that our leadership gives us. So with by Sandeep Singh Sidhu, we had that second opportunity almost where he was relaying Santaji's message again in different languages in a more, you could say, educated manner, so that we could understand abroad as well. And we, again, sometimes we don't heed those messages. And what he did say is, it's not just about the crops, it's about your generations. You need to wake up. So what Deep was referring to there is Santaji's message, that it's about Sikh sovereignty, about self-determination, and about freedom. So Satsangaji, what most of us think, that the people at the forefront in Jate Seva Karde Asi, what we think is that this is Maharaj working in mysterious ways, and there's a lot of movement happening all around the world to bring us closer to our freedom. So ਆਪਾਂ ਰੋਜ਼ ਅਰਦਾਸ ਕਰੀਏ, we should do ardas every day. That way we say Raj Karega Khalsa, that comes closer, and we do actually take Raj. It's not just to kind of say, it's like it will happen one day. So until it happens, we will never be free, and people around us in other states, in Punjab, they won't be free either. So Bhai Dabinderjit Singh Ji, Bhai Jaz Singh, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for PBC always giving us airtime without any question. Bete das kimada jatek fateh bulaune ji, Waheguru ji ka khalsa,
Waਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕਾ ਖਾਲਸਾ, ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਜੀ ਕੀ ਫਤਿਹ।